The following is a Live the Dream Media production.
Hello and welcome to the Faith Family Schools podcast with your host, Christopher DeSimone.
Hello there, this is Chris with Faith Family and Schools, America's Road Back, and we're going to be talking to my good friend Joe Higgins in about 33 seconds about the schools as being one of the big parts of America's Road Back. If you want to follow along with us on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, just look under Faith Family Schools. And of course, you can contact us at faithfamilyschools@gmail.com. And again, the purpose of this podcast and where we're heading to this is you may be wondering, hey, dude, what happened to my country? And it's been disintegrating and changing over a 50, 60-year period. And after Joe and I, if you hit our first episode where we do an overview, we talk about how after trying to solve it through elections and politics, that we figured it out that that's a temporary solution. And so building back Faith Family Schools, and Joe's on the school side of a 35-year period, but it's got to start somewhere. It's going to take a little time, my friends, but if we don't have it now, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So welcome to Faith Family Schools. Welcome back to my good friend Joe Higgins.
Oh, thank you.
And so we used to do this radio show together, and what happened was, as we're doing in the middle of the radio show, you start figuring out how you meet a couple of people, and you guys start talking about starting a charter school.
Yep.
And maybe you thought about, I don't know, did you think, I don't know if I ever asked you this question, did you think of it as the idea of being a business model for some, because you're a kind of a serial entrepreneur kind of guy,
right?
And did it morph into, I think I'm going to try to do my best from my side to help heal America through education?
Well, we've always been involved in education conversations. We've interviewed superintendents and school district candidates and
university presidents.
We're into everything, right?
Yeah.
We just, through this day-to-day thing we were doing, we were in the plan of how to run schools, and super complicated. Their funding mechanisms are all over the place.
That's true.
It's a big part of your community, right? If you're going to have a successful job force and economic development and vibrant community, you got to have good schools. I mean, that's why relocation folks that pick your market are looking at the school systems. I was serving on Catholic school boards, which my kids went to K-8 and high school Catholic school boards. I'm still on a Catholic school board. So just kind of, I've been in it, right? And I've been doing business stuff and other businesses, but I've just been in the school world, and God opened the door. I mean, there was a divine moment where opportunity and business skills met getting into the school world. So in 2014, we wrote a charter in Arizona, and Florida and Arizona were kind of the first bigger open, let charters happen schools. And we got approved, and we opened up a campus in 2015 in a suburb of our market here in Tucson.
So you and I talk about this a lot. I think there might be people listening that hear the word charter school. What does that exactly mean?
Okay, so the laws started to come into fruition in the 1990s, late 1990s, 98. And it's the ability for a group to appeal and write an application to the state to get a public school. So we are a public school. We're dictated by the State Department of Education and the federal issues around public schools to try something different, maybe a different model, maybe a different delivery mechanism, a different flavor to match the big public school kind of concept. There's all kinds of flavors of schools. Montessori, you may have heard of. Sure. Project-based learning, STEM, which is heavy in the science, technology, education, and math. Our model was classical education, which came around, started originally in the Greeks and the Romans. Aristotle had an academy called Lyceum.
Look at you going back to Aristotle.
Kind of got resurgenced in the university systems in France in the 1200s, and then really hit America in the private school world in the late 1800s and all the way through to today. So a lot of your Christian private schools are doing. It's basically real focused on Western Civ. So that was our model that we opened.
So I was on the board for the schools that you started, and I remember it was because each grade level focuses on a certain portion, era of history, right?
Right.
So I remember going into a second grade, third grade, somewhere in there, and there was a big poster of Marcus Aurelius with a quote.
Yep.
I remember going home to my daughter, who's a very learned young lady, and I go, hey, what did you have on your second grade poster? She goes, She goes, I think I had a frog that had a hat on, cowboy hat on, and said, you're doing Route 2 Dootin' good or something like that.
Hang in there, right? No, so it's I'll go a little deeper into classical. It's 4-3-3. So 4 times in history. Start in the ancients, jump over to medieval, go to the founding of America, and then modern. And you repeat that 3 times. So 1st grade, 5th grade, 9th grade, then 2nd, 6th, 10th, 3, 7, 11. So you learn basics when you're young, dates, facts, big things. Then you jump over to a little more deep. It's called the trivium. So the beginning stage of the trivium is grammar stage, math facts, grammar facts, spelling facts. The logic stage comes right around when your kids start asking why, and you want to feed that curiosity with what they've learned.
Sure.
And the 3rd stage is kind of starts in late middle school and then into high school, called the rhetoric stage, where you're able to use the classic art of rhetoric to pull together these facts and these logic you've learned and to have an idea, hold an idea, communicate an idea in writing. And so that's classical ed. Think of it like the old liberal arts colleges and the universities, but taken down into the K-12 model.
Okay.
So that's our model. It really, as I got more into it, because I wasn't from the education world, it lines very closely to what I learned in Catholic schools and my kids went through in Catholic schools. There's an overarching focus on virtues and values, not just, take a bullying curriculum off your shelf, but it's like that's everything you do. So because we're public school, we don't talk about Bible or, Quran or Jewish faith or Mormon faith. It's built around classic literature. So as you're studying the Civil War, you're reading Little Drummer Boy or the Lincoln's Little Drummer Boy. So you're trying to learn fiction and values and virtues along with facts and dates. So that's the idea. The whole goal is depth of understanding and depth of learning and to instill curiosity. In our model, math and music is just as important. English and art is just as important. So it's not just math, English to test to get that score at the end.
It feels like we overloaded into STEM over the last 10, 15 years, right?
And then they added art. So they call it STEAM now. To your point, right?
So clever.
And my approach is look at technology. Look at AI. What's the first thing technology is going to replace? The STEAMs, the bridge builders. What can't it replace is the personal interaction, the ability to be creative and to come up with a thought and to hold that thought, to build a group of people around you and to start a business or lead the country.
So what was the response in the Southern Arizona market to the schools that you helped build?
Essentially, we were a private school, which people were writing a $10,000 check a year to for free. So the response was off the charts. We opened up year 1 with 500 scholars, year 2, 1,000, year 3, 2,000, year 4, almost 4,000. So we doubled every year. Opened up 7 campuses in a couple states and 1,100 K-8 kids. We got into preschool. We did special needs and special ed well. We got the best teachers to come in our door, and we created an amazing culture that made them want to stay. And we were holding 90% teacher retention rate while I was leading it, and at the same time adding 100 teachers a year as we grew. So as a business dude, due to education, absolutely everything worked perfectly. Amazing teachers, great programs.
So part of that is what you guys are doing, but part of it is also the market.
Yeah, a hunger.
Right. Because we've talked about when opening up a charter school or a private school, there's that perfect environment.
Yep.
Right. And the Southern Arizona, we're in the Tucson area where we at just seemed to be the perfect environment. Why was Tucson in the state of Arizona the perfect environment to do a classical ed K through 8 school?
A massive growth. So we're in a state that there's a lot of people coming here, and the state couldn't keep up with the cost of building new campuses. So we were like a relief valve that offered something. Like many big cities, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, you name them, they typically have a big legacy school district surrounded by a bunch of little suburbs that have other school districts. So we're the same story. So our legacy school district, which is in our market called TUSD, was notoriously rough and bad and underperforming, and grades weren't there. And
it was in the news for all the wrong
reasons, right? They're battling and restorative justice and fights that would go viral around the country happening at the high school. So just a really difficult
and almost critical race theory stuff also.
Way early in that game. Before you heard it in the news, it was going on. And, you and I did the show together.
Tucson's a petri dish for a lot of bad ideas. You'll learn that over time.
You and I did the show for 7 years together. We interviewed 6 or 7 superintendents of that school district, right? They kept coming and going and coming and going. And how do you ever get any kind of momentum or leadership or vision or future if you're just turning the top like that? So the bureaucracy hunkers in. The ideologues come along. It became a big jobs program in many ways.
So let's identify some of the factors of those legacy school districts, which are the ones that are leaving no child left behind, that are leaving lots of kids behind. You and I have talked about, it's funny, you showed me the one stat about the growth of administrative bloat compared to teachers.
Yes.
And that was something that our friend Mark Stegman brought up to us. This is before you ever, I mean, that's like 8-9 years ago, right? He's like, I'm noticing that administrative is up like 17%, but teacher pay was up 3%.
Right.
So that's something that's
same at the universities, right?
Right.
We're seeing that over and over, right? So the bureaucratic creep. And I think there's a couple things going on there. Whether it be federal grants, federal money flowing in that they would have to scale up and bring in, that would then go away.
This is in our first episode. It's going to ride through all of our episodes, right? The handcuffs of government money.
Right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So, and then the issues that are going on in society around families and needs for these kids, and the school becoming the one-stop shop where things are happening. It was a real kind of popular thing called community schools, which has its merit, right? Because you have these kids in your environment for a period of time. And when I was leading our organization, there was constant pressure to do all these extra things, right? Serve breakfast and, all these things, mental health. And my approach was, hey, let's do school really well. Let's do K-12 or K-8 really, really well. And let's see who's in the community that can do these other things, that use our school, come in the afternoons, do whatever. But let's do school well to kind of guard the treasury and guard our mission. I think public schools have creeped a lot into things that no one else is doing it, and they're taking that role.
Right.
And it could be golden handcuffs, right? The Fed gives some grant money down, and then you get into the program and you start doing this service, and then that money goes away under the next administration or the next thing, and then you're in it. And now what do I do?
What about the ideological dynamic of the school, the big school? School wants to replace the parents. Is that a reality? What are we seeing in that? Is it the idea that so I'm sure the school people that are into that would say, we'll have so many kids from broken families that we have to step in. Right.
Chicken egg, right? So is it, there is no family, and we have campuses in all different demographics. So we're in very wealthy and very poor communities, whole different stories in each, right? So when you're in a poorer community, it's single parents, grandparents raising children. There's adverse childhood events called ACEs in that family, where prisons and drugs and all kinds of things when those children come to you as a school environment. So you have some of that, right? But you also have some philosophies that, we know it better. The school can do it better, and we got this, go back home.
Is it the idea?
Don't you think COVID kind of opened that up a little bit?
Of
you
course.
got to see behind the curtain of what's really, So to your point.
So I was going to say so what we're seeing is that you have these kids from broken families that might have not the greatest parent situation. Is it sometimes the tendency of the school district to treat all those families exactly like that family?
It depends on each market, but yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
I'm just trying to look at, in the end, right, what is the general failure of the K through 12 public government school over the last 50 years?
Yep.
Because that's one of our most giant problem as a society, I think.
Yep. It's not a money problem. It's who's coming in the door problem. It's moving towards heavy-duty testing, math, English, instead of looking at the full approach and the full well-rounded student. My philosophy has always been, we may be the only place that's having big discussions with these kids about right and wrong or courage or, any of the 18 or 20 values and virtues we embed into everything we do. Churches aren't doing it like they used to. The role of these stupid phones and this short attention span and what's being fed to the kids in their brains from birth on. All these things are coming in the door to these schools, and what's that look like?
So I was just having a discussion with my buddy Drew, and we were talking about education. We were talking about C.S. Lewis' abolition of man, but we got into education, and I forgot. It goes back to one of those smart Greek philosopher guys, but it was the idea that education is not the filling of a bucket, right? It's the sparking of a flame.
Yeah, or cultivating mind. Yep.
However, I'm sure there's various.
There's a bunch of them on those. Yep.
Right. And so we've gotten away from, we're trying to fill buckets, But at the same way, there's also, it's interesting. So we're trying to fill buckets, but at the same time, we have a lot of social promotion going on.
Yeah. Grade inflation. I just read an article about that where grades are through the roof, but
grade inflation, that's a hot name.
At the grade level, at the campus level, but when they take the standardized tests, they're below reading levels. I think somewhere, was it a Chicago district that had like no kids that passed reading?
We know LeBron James' school had a little problem with that too.
There, right?
Okay. So,
but you know, where did that start? Where did this high stakes testing thing came? And it kind of came No Child Left Behind under George Bush. And then Obama with Common Core and Bill Gates. You inspect what you expect. You've heard that statement in the business world. You start telling a school district, hey, your grade and your money or your incentives or a teacher in a classroom depends on how little Johnny does on this test, whether it be English or math. They're going to move their entire world there. So when we started our school and we'd get a public school teacher come into our door, we'd have to sit them down and say, look, that's important. And we're here to educate all parts of the child. You pick teaching because you want to impact children's lives, make a difference in your community, and that was why you're here. That's why we're here too. So our philosophy was, if you spend the time and attention on character development and art and music and dissecting great literature, not just from a point of theme, plot, character, and vocabulary, but from a part, what did that character mean? And how do you feel about that character? And would you do it? The Socratic method of dissection, that they would do better on tests. And by goodness, they did. But that takes time. Yeah. And that takes vision of leadership from a top down to say, this is why we're here and where we're going.
It's also breaking a dynamic that's been metastasizing, if I said the right word, for 50 years.
Right. So it was almost a little bit of a deprogramming.
Right.
And they would pick our model because they love that thought, right? They love a Socratic way of teaching, and we're going to do the whole child. Then inevitably they'd get about September and they'd be breaking down and it's not working. So we'd have to come around them from a training point of view and build them back up. And how do you mass produce that? How do you get a state to say, hey, I want math and English, but I also want to make sure we have character development going on in that classroom?
A wise friend of mine, Joe Higgins, once said there's various ways of changing a bureaucracy. How do you do it?
Starve it of money or inject competition.
Right.
That's what I've learned. So the choice movement, the charter school movement in my case, or vouchers, or sending your kids to
educational freedom is
is injecting competition. And now I have seen districts react in a beautiful way. The one right north of us, they shut down old schools, they open up new schools, they create new models. I mean, it causes legacy school districts to change and to be different, and that's awesome. That's
so
what it should be.
You and I were hanging out with education nerds last November up in Phoenix with the Heritage Foundation and the Goldwater Institute, and the Heritage Foundation guy, I think it was Ohio, right? He talked about how as educational freedom grew through either open enrollment, charter schools, I don't know if they were getting into ESAs in those points, which are empowerment scholarship accounts, it showed that the rest of the public schools did.
Yeah. Right.
Started dragging their game up.
Right.
It's because
you have to.
Of competition.
Right. Right. It's like go to the DMV or have those little outlet stores in the strip centers that do DMV work. Where are you going to go?
Right.
Well, I'm going to this one because it's $20, but I get to not wait in line and be just in pain. So that in general, I think that's the role of the choice movement. Those of us that were blessed could afford private schools or Christian schools or Catholic schools. I mean, the old adage is we drove old cars and sent our kids to Catholic schools. It's great, but not everybody can do that.
Sure.
So what this charter model does and these choice models do is open doors to families that could never make that decision.
So is full-blown school choice the answer, or your legacy K through 12s aren't really going to go away, right?
It's yes and for me. I think school choice is, and I'm all over the country doing this and talking to different groups and at different levels. There has been a very, very concerted effort to slow down the school choice model.
Sure.
I see it. I mean, it's clear as day. I was there before the change, and it happened in 2018, and I'm there after. And I see it from multiple states, red states.
It's amazing how that has boomeranged in 5 years.
Right. Well, which if I'm a legacy
also
school district,
yeah.
If I'm a legacy school district that has a budget and has this machine in place, the last thing I want is competition. So they're using all these mechanisms to slow down the industry.
So we've seen some schools try to get better, school districts, legacy school districts. But what's that? 7%. Right? The rest of them are just
rent seeking. Keep me out. Shut it down. Don't let this choice happen.
All the hang on the empty schools that other schools or other people want to buy from them because no, really, it's going to come back one day.
Yep.
Right? So there's TUSD has a school here that it's called Santa Rita High School. It was built for 2,000 kids. It has 250 in it right now.
Oh, you're kidding me.
They can't even field sports teams.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Right? So Vail, who's a better school district that borders on them, offered to buy the school in 19 because they'll fill it. And they don't have to build a new one. They just have to rehab this one, all this stuff, right? And TUSD said, well, no.
Oh.
We're coming back. Wow. We're going to fill up that extra 1,800 kids.
Just think of the cost to carry that. Yeah. Oh. Right. So now a Supreme Court decision happened, I think, in 2018 that allowed states to fund parents, and then they can decide where that dollar goes. The state can't fund a Christian school or Catholic school or private tuition, but they can fund the parents. So you're seeing a blossoming in homeschool. You're seeing charters becoming still an option. And the public schools are still surviving and doing well.
And open enrollment, it's been important. The idea that your kid can go anywhere, not just the one they're geographically in. So Arizona's had an explosion of these ESAs. So ESA is $7,000?
Yep, roughly.
Right, roughly $7,000 that a parent can spend on their kid on homeschooling, private school, that kind of thing. And so what I love is when I see the people who don't like ESAs, which are mostly teachers unions, the shade they throw on it is, well, there's a good portion of those people who are already homeschooling and we're just handing them $7,000. What do you say to those people?
Who's best to make the decision?
Right.
I'm a parent. It's my child. I know what's best for my child.
And I've been fronting the cash all this time to pay for my kid's schooling. Oh, and your credit K-12 school.
And you're collecting my property taxes for that, over time, there's Arizona kind of left it to be the Wild West. They didn't put much restrictions on it. You're starting to see that come, where that money can be spent.
And if the legislature changes.
Yeah, if you lose a legislative body or one of your branches of government, you could lose the whole process.
All right, so I want to talk on the K-12 side.
Sure.
Because the idea that they're not going away anytime soon.
Nope.
So Joe Higgins, I ask you, you're in a not so great K-12 school system what are some of the top things you notice about a K-12 system, public government school?
You got to look at the test results, what's happening on reading proficiencies. To spend 12, 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade, and not have a proficiency in reading at a 3rd, 4th grade level is a big problem. Many, many states did move on in reading, where if you're not by 3rd grade reading, then you hold back and you start really going all in. Big debate going on. Just take reading about whole word versus phonetic.
Sure.
And we had this big push for whole word forever, and now they're looking at the role of phonetic learning. Usually it's only in a couple semesters of 1st grade kindergarten to set that up. But that's a policy decision that was made a long time ago. I think you had the New York superintendent of public instruction said, "We failed you. We're sorry. We're going to go."
Oh, that's huge, right?
Yeah, right. You never hear that.
So a couple of weeks ago on my radio show, I had the Marana School District, which is just north of us here. And they actually did the same thing when it came to reading proficiency. They admitted it. We were a disjointed mess.
Wow.
We needed to fix this. So they have a director of literacy, right?
Wow.
That's all her job is those third grade reading levels. And they had crazy things. Because one of the things we saw, like in broken K-12s, like Tucson Unified, was disjointed curriculums.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
Right.
And where 3rd grade doesn't know what 4th grade's doing, or you're not prepared from 5th to 6th.
Correct.
Like math and just the alignment, which as a business dude, that's the first thing when I came into this.
You and I would always laugh on the radio show because TUST, they're our poster child for bad governance, would always do every 2 or 3 years, they'd bring in a consultant. And
300 grand later, right? Here's your problem.
And number one, I'd say, Joe, what's one? And you go, disjointed curriculum that doesn't line up. It was always
always.
So give Marana credit. They admitted they had a reading problem, and they went to. So I asked them, "Are we doing whole world of phonetics?" Like, we're going back to phonetics.
Good, excellent.
But finding a school district that admitted they got a problem and they're going to fix it. That's the other part. Yeah. All these things we talk about on faith family schools.
Right.
Someone has to admit that we got a problem and stop looking at it as a sign of weakness. Right? Because all of your Tony Robbins books and everything you've ever read said, hey, admit you got a problem, fix it from there.
Yep.
You've all been reading it for decades. Now I need people in faith, family, and schools to start saying, hey, maybe we haven't been doing this so well. You don't have to do a mea culpa and go, we failed the children.
Right. But let's just take ESA. Let's take Arizona as an example. Because of that new move, parents have choices, right? They can leave that legacy school district. They can look at Marana's results and the school that's near them, the suburb community.
So the
They can
updated
look at
number
a
is
charter.
61,000 parents have taken
done it.
advantage of these empowerment
It just
scholarships.
gives the parent their choice of where they enroll. Money follows along, so they can wield a little more power and a little more decision factors, and it makes the good school districts or the charters or wherever you are wake up every day and go, what does mom want? What does kids want? What do the great teachers want? And how do I build this container that makes those stakeholders happy? Because then good things will follow, and that's the game.
So if Joe Higgins was given the magic wand, and you were given a school district of 40,000 kids, right, and anything that you say would go to fix that K-12 school, what would the Higgins plan look like to fix a K through 12 school district that's classic? What would you do?
I would break it down. I would break it up.
Yep.
It's back to the 50 different petri dishes of the American states,
What's
I
the
think
state
10,
number?
10, 12 becomes efficient and smart.
Okay.
You start getting the 50s, 60s, and it starts becoming inefficient. And a lot of bureaucracy and bloat. I would allow those breakups, those 10, 12s, to do their own thing. I would say, okay, let's create a STEM school. Let's create an art school. Let's create a classical school. Let's do different things, right? And let that let's be competitive. I would create a culture that is nurturing and forgiving, and say, principal, you know this family better than I do. You tell me what that community needs and what we should be doing, and let me support you through that process. Huge. It wouldn't be a top-down approach, which you see the top-down approach in the big districts. You see the turnover in the superintendents that we talked about.
Sure.
And then you see grants and things coming down from the Fed level, Common Core. If you do this, you're going to get this.
Right.
You got this big thing that's hard to move and maneuver and respond to the market. AI is changing the world. Have we thought of that 10 years ago? Did we build a school system that's ready for that? We're kind of running.
That's a whole other show. AI.
Yeah, we're kind of running on the Prussian system and factory worker system, and not the creative thinking that is the future of our community and our culture.
And then at the same time, you have to. We've had some of our friends who run the Flowingwell School District down here, which is probably the lowest income demographic.
By far. 8 to 10,000 kids. So they're this small sweet spot I told you.
But they seem to excel
Always.
They always excel past their expectations.
And what is it?
So what I learned, and we've talked to Nick Clement and these kind of guys that run the place. First of all, number one, hit me was engagement from kindergarten of the parents. Then it was building the character of the students.
Soft skills.
Yeah.
And remember we had the phone call. The lady called in and said, yeah, they held the door open for me and walked me to my seat. And
They were
at
the
an event of
nicest,
some kind, right?
courteous. I was going to my granddaughter's recital. And she's like, I can't believe how many of these high school kids went out of their way to help me find her, hold the door, let me walk you. She's like, where the hell was I? And it was
so we have this success in our schools and things are just rocking, right? So I'm talking to parents. Why is this? What's different? What's unique? Two things that would come back to me overwhelmingly. Kids love talking about history. We make the history come alive and they find it interesting. So at the dinner table, we're always talking about history, number one. Number two is we notice the character things you do in the school at home. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, hold the door open, all those soft skills from kindergarten on up. That's embedded in our school model. They see it at home and they reinforce it at home. Those are the two big things. So what it taught me was that's what I really have. That's what I'm doing. So really spent a lot of time being intentional about character development, combed through research, built out a model, a 10-point plan. It's embedded in our schools. That's the key, I think, because you're doing more than just teaching the math facts and the English facts and the history facts. You're teaching, how did you feel? What did that look like? How would you do that if you were Charlotte's Web? Did she do the right thing? It's those intrinsic things that in this busy, crazy world where church is taking less of a role, families are pulled apart and doing different things, we may be the only place that's having those big discussions.
Right.
Let's model that.
Well, I love what you're saying, right? And the idea that your those soft skills, that's the rest of their lives.
Yeah, right. I mean, when you look at hiring people, you hire people. I do too.
Yep.
What do you look for?
Soft skills.
Soft skills.
We could talk about this.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Hopefully, we'll.
many
but
times.
I think I've granularized it, right? So I've created curriculum maps, and third grade goes to fourth grade, and everything lines together, and this value and virtue embeds in everything we do. And I think that's the way one day you get to the public schools.
So
you create a mechanism where they can do that as well.
So if you had a positive vision of how school choice and the educational freedom movement affects the world in America for the next 20 years, what would you hope that looks like?
Every family is different. Every child's different. So let's create a market that lets that happen, right? I have two kids. One's different than the other.
Right.
One may flourish in a STEM school, and the other may flourish in more of a liberal arts, art-based school. Let that happen, because we're not all one big cookie cutter. What made this country great was that freedom and that ability to do what you want to do, and to learn from the past and internalize it and go out and plow your own course. The top-down one-size-fits-all clearly is not working.
Sure.
We're seeing it not working. So how do you change? Now, there's going to be some losers, and there's going to be some winners, and there's going to be some current systems that have to go away or aren't as big and as crazy as they are today. But that's a good thing, right? That's part of life. Us in the private sector, we do that every day. We wake up, and if I own a pizza shop and I'm not delivering a good pizza, I don't stay around very long. So
Lad, I got one more question for
Yeah.
you. So let's say things in the world of political that enable the educational freedom side goes totally against educational freedom. What can mom and dad and grandma and grandpa now be doing other than running for school board? I mean, what else do you do?
Oh man, we just touched on this earlier, but COVID has laid bare a lot, and families get to see really what's happening behind the curtain, and they are really not happy. I just did a big analysis of North Carolina. Let's take private schools, charter schools, and homeschool. Which of the three is biggest?
Private schools, charter schools, or homeschool?
It's a red state. They have a charter movement.
Homeschool.
178,000 homeschoolers, about 130,000 charters, and about 128,000 privates. And that's only
number surprising. That if you tell me there's 178,000 homeschoolers in North Carolina,
they just passed a voucher. It's kind of starting up and ramping up. But their public schools, I think there's 1.3 million. So
Yep.
when you talk about how you're going to impact and 35-year plan, you got to get to the public.
that still
school
sounds
sector.
high to me. 10%.
Of what?
You said there's 1.3 million kids.
1.8 total kids in the state.
Right.
So about 10% in charter and home, about 8% in charter, and about 8% in.
Actually, 10% higher than I thought.
Yeah. And that's because
COVID.
I think, they left and I can do this. It's not that hard. So that's part of my model is I'm building a program for the homeschool community. And as I put campuses in, I want to build 2,000 square feet for the homeschool families to come into and be part of that and talk to a teacher and say, hey, am I doing it right? So I think it's embracing that. It's in looking at that growing market and saying, how do we make that mom happy? Our focus groups told us that the biggest fear of homeschoolers are time and am I doing it right?
Sure.
So if I can alleviate that by giving them a roadmap and a plan and some curriculum and a way to check in with a real teacher to say, hey, is my kid on the right path?
That
Those are the
COVID online learning thing was an absolute unmitigated disaster. Having it. I mean, you're telling a first grade teacher to teach 27 kids first grade over a computer.
I watched it. It was not
insanity.
I watched. I have a little video that I'll share with you offline where he's got 20 on the screen and 10 in front of him or 15 in front of him, whatever the number was. Really, really difficult to read. Pay attention.
So Gabe Trujillo, who's the guy who runs TUSD, he was just on my radio show, Wake Up Tucson, shameless plug, and just end of August, and he said that online learning for the Tucson's largest was an unmitigated disaster. And he thinks these kids are 2 years behind.
Yeah.
Easy.
Now, I have a child who was in high school at the time and went through college. He's been online most of the time, and it worked for him. So it does work for some. And no one has figured out that mix yet for all, right?
Well, one of our conversations is going to be college one day, because that's a whole other ball of wax. So we'll do that another day.
You got it.
Thanks for all your time and all your work on all this. Joe and I have this conversation anyway.
Right. This is the most important. We're both Gen Xers. We're inheriting this country.
Yep.
This is the most important thing to focus on: faith, family, and schools.
Amen, brother.
Amen.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you on our next episode of Faith Family Schools. You can check us out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, if you're interested in what we're talking about, you want to follow up with us with any questions, comments, send us some great guests you think may fit into the road back Faith Family Schools. Hit us up at faithfamilyschools@gmail.com. Thanks for watching and listening, and we're going to get it back one day. It's going to take a little while, a little hard work, but hang in there with us on Faith, Family, and Schools. Everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.